Chapter 18 Going for Sunday Drives. It was Sunday, and a beautiful sunny day with a clear blue sky. It is an Aussie tradition to go for a Sunday drive, so Andy Haddis and Theo decided to visit their Greek friends who also ran a cafe. Their friends lived in Portland, by the sea, on the southern coastline of Victoria. They wanted to discuss work and perhaps ask them if their business was going okay. At this time, cafes were losing customers because hotels had started cooking counter lunches. Lucas Cafe was not making much money as it had lost business to the pubs that had begun to serve lunches. It seemed like their business was going nowhere. Maybe they could all talk about it and come up with a good idea together. Andy had a 1956 Holden he had named Spiro. Theo and his family and Andy and his family all crowded into his car. It would take a drive of about an hour and a half down the Henty Highway. It was named after the man who first settled in the Portland area with his family, Edward Henty, in 1834. He dug the land and grew the first wheat crop too. The first person to start living in the Melbourne area was John Batman in 1835. So you see, Portland was the first European settlement in Victoria. Theo sat in the passenger seat and their wives in the back. Between them they had 7 small children who sat beside them in the front seat and in the back seat. It was very squashy, but they were able to fit on the bench seats because there were no seat belts and the smaller children sat on the laps of the bigger ones. As they travelled along, they could see lots of rubbish on the sides of the road. It had been thrown out of car windows. There were rubbish bags, empty cigarette packets, and glass bottles. During the first half of the 20th century, people had different thinking and did not really worry about pollution. But in 1969, the government started television commercials and advertisements like "Keep Australia Beautiful" and "Do the Right Thing" and "Tidy Towns." Portland is about 85 kilometres from Hamilton, so when they arrived there, the children felt stiff. They wanted to run free, so out they went to play along the beach. The children were having fun, running on the sand and grassy area. They took off their shoes and socks and felt the cool sand between their toes. It felt good. They laughed and they played with the waves on the beach. Vula didn't see the bee in the grass until she stepped on it, and it stung her. She cried with pain. Argiro took the bee stinger out, but her daughter's foot was sore, red, and swollen. They went to their friend's cafe for ice. Vula could not run for the rest of the day and was miserable, sitting still with the adults all day long. Another time, Theo and Andy drove to Portland. Theo took his daughter along as well for an outing. She sat in the back seat behind her father. It was all going very nicely, with a few songs sung along the way. Then Theo decided to have a cigarette. He lit up and threw the dead match out of the window. To save Andy the work of emptying out the car's ashtray, Theo flicked his cigarette ash out of his window. Vula had opened her window to get some fresh air in the car because she hated breathing in the smoke from her dad's cigarettes. Unluckily, Theo's cigarette ash flew back into the car through Vula's window and onto her clothes. Vula looked down and saw some sparks of fire were burning holes in her collar. When she cried out for help, Andy stopped the car on the side of the road and Theo jumped out to check what was happening. He put out the fires with his hands and double-checked that they were truly out. He looked a bit shocked and didn't smoke in the car after that. Port Fairy and Warrnambool were also favourite locations for the families, but again it was always hot and cramped in Andy's car, with everyone sitting on top of each other. At Warrnambool, the 12 Apostles were a wonderful sight, even though there were only 9 of them. The rocks and pools were fun to jump onto. Along the cliffs were many little bones of sea creatures which had died long ago. Digging for these bones with a little pick or with a strong stone was another popular thing to do to pass the time. About 16 kilometres west of Hamilton are the Wannon Falls, and to the north of Hamilton, about 77 kilometres and an hour and 20 minutes away, are the Grampians, with hundreds of steps leading down to waterfalls and rocks. It was unusual if someone did not fall and get injured, as the children ran excitedly from one place to another. They were thrilled by the loud noise of the waterfalls and enjoyed the cool water on their toes after running around on the rocks in the sunshine. There was always so much to see and do.